You ready? Here we go. Chapter 7. Kate stood across the street from Paige's bookstore later that afternoon, feeling like a fool. She was hiding, and she knew it. She was scoping out the place, waiting for the right moment to go in, keeping an eye out for a black pickup truck or an ambulance, or, allegedly, a motorbike. The store was like a second home to her in many ways. She knew it so well, had spent so much time there over the years, especially when Paige's mom had renovated the apartment upstairs, and the family of 3 had moved in. Paige lived there now herself, and Kate couldn't wait to see what she'd done to modernize it. The shop was as much a part of Cedar Lake as the lake itself, as the people who called it home, as the stories that had been lived for generations. It was nestled comfortably in the middle of Main Street, in between a ladies' clothing boutique, with the name Lillian's curling elegantly in hand-painted cursive script from the 1950s, and the post office on the other side. Peonies and forget-me-nots overflowed their window boxes, and Kate was touched to see one basket full of wildflowers from a special seed bundle she'd sent Paige last fall. Above the door, a weathered wooden sign featured 2 cats, one white and one black, their tails entwined and their heads bent affectionately towards each other, beneath the carved and painted words, Lizzie and Fitz. That sign had been there for as long as Kate could remember. And so had the cats for whom the store was named. They lived upstairs with Paige and ventured downstairs during the day to grant audiences to their adoring public. Lizzie, the ice-white one, had been named for Elizabeth Bennet of Pride and Prejudice, and the coal-black male was Fitz, short for Fitzwilliam Darcy, Lizzie's once proud but passionate paramour. The store was on their 5th Lizzie and their 7th Fitz, but most people chose not to bring this up, preferring instead to pretend the feline pair were immortal and would always be a part of the store. Kate had always thought it romantic and sweet that Paige's grandfather had loved Jane Austen enough to name his bookstore after 2 of her most famous characters, and she'd loved knowing Austen wasn't just for girls, after all. She stood watching the sign swing gently, creaking in the afternoon breeze. She'd quickly cast her eyes down if she heard the bell jangle and saw someone emerge from or enter the store. She had to make absolutely sure Noah wasn't in there. There was no way she could do what she had come to do if he were there. She was scoping the place, but she didn't want to make it look like she was scoping the place. How embarrassing would that be if he caught her surreptitiously craning her neck to see if he were inside? His reaction from earlier that morning still stung, as if the event itself was giving her memory a punishing little nip whenever it could. But what should she have done? Fallen into his arms for a Lloyd-like quickie and then watched as Noah, too, made excuses and left? An MFA had to mean something, even when it came to Noah. Especially when it came to Noah. Because she had a feeling he would be an order of magnitude harder to get over than Lloyd had been. Satisfied that there was no pesky twin brother in sight, she crossed the street on an angle and took a long look in through the large panes of glass, just to make extra sure there didn't happen to be a large blonde goof standing at the counter. Seeing the coast was clear, she quickly ducked in. The store was everything a cozy old bookstore should be. The building had once been a house, like many of the shops lining Main Street, but Paige's grandfather had converted the downstairs into a bookstore back in the 60s. He'd been ahead of his time, choosing to leave the front area much as it had once been, a casual space with a fireplace, a deep, cozy sofa, and comfortable chairs for readers to relax and sip coffee and tea while they read. Paige had remained true to his vision, updating the sofas with the times and adding cappuccino to the menu, but otherwise preserving the nook as a place for conversation, for reflection, for pause. The rest of the store was a crowded, happy effusion of books. Bookshelves of various colors, shapes, and sizes lined every wall. No one ever threw out a bookshelf in this town. Paige would often come to work and find another donation at her back door, sometimes tall, stately oak shelving units, other times brightly painted kids' room shelves complete with fairy stickers all over them. She used every one of them, never wanting to seem unappreciative of the town's generosity. The result was an eclectic collection of mismatched displays that had nonetheless been meticulously ordered and maintained by Paige and her part-timers. Mysteries, romances, and the more popular works of fiction occupied the displays at the front of the store, with nonfiction, biographies, children's books, classics, and poetry further back. If it had ever been in print, Paige had a section for it, stretching back into the depths of the long building and spilling over into piles that sat on brightly painted wooden chairs or upturned antique wooden crates. Each riser of the staircase that led up to Paige's upstairs flat was dotted with towers of paperbacks, all neatly arranged by title in alphabetical order. Even the counter that ran along the wall to the right of the front door was a throwback to times past. Instead of a modern workstation, it was actually the counter from an old drugstore soda fountain. When the local druggists had burned down in the 70s, Paige's grandfather had rescued the counter, complete with the old taps for pulling root beer floats, and even a couple of old chrome bar stools, and installed it in his store. Now it was home to a wild array of book paraphernalia, pamphlet stands, a discount bin, a bookmark stand, fridge magnets with literary quotes in fancy Edwardian script. It was also home to a giant bowl of chocolate-covered mints, which called seductively to Kate. She resisted at first, but gave in and popped one in her mouth as Paige emerged from the stacks and came forward with a bright smile. "Good morning, hon." She hugged Kate warmly. "Want some coffee? There's some left." "I'd love some," Kate said. She sat on one of the stools and leaned her elbows on the counter as if she was about to order a sundae with sprinkles. "So, I'm here to work, boss. Use me and abuse me. I'm yours." Paige turned around and blinked at her, creamer poised over a coffee cup. "Sorry?" "I want to help out," Kate expanded, glancing around. "I'm sure you could use a willing volunteer. Anything you need, dusting, organizing, whatever." Paige smiled and finished pouring the cream. She slid the cup towards Kate, just as Lizzie ambled by, tail in the air. Paige stroked her absently and smiled. "You're very sweet to offer, but there's no need." "You're sweet to let me stay in the cabin," Kate insisted. "It's the least I can do. Put me to work. I'll even clean the litter boxes. That's how much I love you." Paige laughed and reached out to squeeze Kate's hand. "I love you too. But I mean it, there's literally no need." Paige gestured forlornly around the empty store. "As you can see, business isn't exactly booming." Kate frowned and surveyed the empty store. "Well, maybe not this minute. It is a weekday after all. I bet it picks up later." "Oh, it does," Paige agreed, sipping her own cup of green tea and scritching under the chin of the sleepy white cat. A little, anyway. And tomorrow the Agathas are coming in for their monthly meeting. It's just that, well, as you can imagine, I'm serving up a lot of coffee and conversation and not selling a lot of books." "Maybe you should sell the coffee and give away the books," Kate offered, half joking. "There's still only that one coffee shop in town, right?" "Yeah, but there's a rumor about Starbucks eyeing up Cedar Lake. And aside from Amazon and their damn free shipping, there's that new mega bookstore over in Dunmore." Paige frowned, and Kate could see worry lines starting to etch between Paige's forehead. "It's drawing away a lot of business. I mean, come on, it's in the Walmart parking lot. It has a ton of exposure." "Yeah, but this place has such charm, such history," Kate insisted, running her hand appreciatively along the counter. "Maybe you should rename it Paige's. Get it? Paige's?" Paige laughed. "Oh, I've heard that one about 1,000,000 times. That and the idea that I should marry Cecil Turner, that old notary guy, so that I could be a real page turner." Kate rolled her eyes and laughed. "Seriously, though, thank you for the offer, but I'm not putting you to work. Just enjoy yourself, drink your coffee. We just got some great old Hercule Poirot's in. I know you love that series." "Oh, I do," said Kate, swiveling on the stool to glance around the shop. When her eyes fell on what she was looking for, she snapped her fingers and pointed. "But actually, I was wondering if I could use your computer." Paige lifted her eyes up towards the front of the shop, to the little computer nook nestled in the corner where the window met the wall. Kate slid off the stool and went to the little desk, trying to determine just how ancient the computer was and if it was even connected to the internet. "Sure," said Paige, coming to the end of the counter, curious. "I'm just trying this out, mostly for the older folks who want to Skype with their grandkids. It's not state-of-the-art or anything." "That's okay," said Kate, sitting down and firing up the monitor. "You said the Wi-Fi up at the cabin might be a bit unreliable, and I checked on my phone last night. You're right, it's a bit hit and miss. I just need a stable connection for a few minutes." Not being able to log on with her laptop last night or check Facebook with her phone had come as a bit of a shock for a city dweller like Kate, but she had assumed there'd be better connectivity in town. She checked for the little Wi-Fi signal in the top right corner of the computer screen and saw 5 robust bars, solid and comforting, promising her access to the wider world. She asked for the password and logged in quickly and glanced out the window to keep an eye out for Noah. Paige watched over her shoulder, unabashedly nosy. "What are you doing?" Kate glanced up at her and smiled. "I just need to log on for a second here." Take your time. Paige waved it away. "I'm just curious. You look nervous." Kate opened an internet browser and waited while the page came up. With her fingers poised over the keys to type in the web address she wanted to go to directly, she paused, bit her lip, and looked up sheepishly at Paige. "Remember what I told you before I came back?" she began. "About an MFA?" "No more fucking around," Paige nodded. "Yeah, well, I've decided to take it a step further." Paige's eyebrows lifted. "Oh?" Kate typed in the web address, and after a second, a bright, happy website filled the screen with the words marriageminded.com dancing along the top in a tasteful but cheery font. Smiling, happy faces of people in love beamed back at her, along with testimonials down the sides and a username and password field in the middle. "What's this?" Paige asked, leaning forward and squinting. "Marriage-minded? What is it, a dating site?" "Sort of," Kate said brightly. "Only it's more serious. It's a place where you can selectively meet only those people interested in getting married." "Really?" Paige looked uncertain. She crossed her arms over her chest and regarded the screen. "They have such a thing?" "Oh, absolutely, and it's a great idea," Kate said, quickly typing in her username and password. That brought her to another page, dotted with thumbnail-sized images of earnest-looking men with hopeful smiles and clever usernames like Romaniac and You plus me equals forever. She frowned at some of the cheesier ones. Just ignore the usernames. They don't let you use your real name on the profile, not until you arrange a date. "I don't know about this," Paige said, straightening up and coming out from behind the counter to approach Kate. "No, really, it's a great site. You don't have to spend time getting to know someone who's just looking for a quick fling or some cheater trolling for an affair. Have you met anyone on here, like in person?" "Not yet," Kate said, sighing with a kind of breathless excitement. "I'm just about to upload my profile. Then, with any luck, I'll get messaged by someone, or I can message people I'm interested in." "Okay," Paige said, leaning forward to look more closely at one man's picture and brief details. "This guy lives in Alaska, though." "Well, obviously I'd narrow the search field," Kate laughed. "There are quite a few on here who live in the city that's only an hour away. And this one's got 6 kids. So, who says the man I marry has to be childless?" "Kate," Paige began, a maternal tone of exasperation entering her voice. Kate decided to head it off at the pass. I know. You don't have to say it, but trust me, this is worth a try." Paige frowned, and her eyebrows drew even closer together. "So, what does your profile say?" "Oh, you know, the typical stuff." Kate turned back to the screen and moused her way through several options before clicking the upload button. She watched as the little green bar slowly inched across the screen until it was finally done and the web page refreshed, congratulating her on uploading her profile. "What typical stuff?" "Who I am, what I do, movies I like, books I like, the typical drill." "And," Paige hesitated, watching as a new page loaded, this one featuring a small, pretty photo of Kate in the upper corner, and a resume-style profile next to it. She leaned forward. How exactly is this different from that hookup site? What's it called? It's nothing like that, Kate laughed. "It's a site for serious, marriage-minded people. The only guys I'll be talking to are looking for the same thing I'm looking for. Come on, you've got to see what a great idea this is." "Huh," Paige laughed, but it was an anemic little laugh. "What?" Kate's face fell. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you have something against online dating. People have been doing it for more than a decade now. It's incredibly common to meet your significant other on a website. You know that." I know, Paige said. "It's just the marriage thing. I don't know, it seems a little forced." I mean, wouldn't you rather meet someone the old-fashioned way? Kate sighed. I did meet someone the old-fashioned way. I've met 6 someones the old-fashioned way. One of them maxed out my credit cards and stole my car. She counted off on her fingers. One of them told me 6 months into our relationship that he believed monogamy was unnatural. One of them I caught in bed, tied up with my nylons underneath my yoga instructor. Paige snorted with laughter and quickly covered her mouth to hide it, though her eyes still danced. It's not funny, Kate said, but she too had to hide a laugh. Was it Mark, the new yoga teacher? Paige asked, referring to the only boyfriend of Kate's she had ever met. No, it wasn't Mark. He was the monogamy's unnatural one. It was Damien I caught with Rodrigo. Paige clamped her hand over her mouth again and squeezed her eyes shut against more laughter. When she opened them again, they were wet and bright with well-controlled mirth. I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. She reached out and put a comforting and apologetic hand on Kate's shoulder. It's just that image, Kate. I know. Kate frowned, but smiled through it. And just when I finally thought maybe I had met a nice, normal, decent guy from work, someone I had known for months before we went out, someone cool and funny and interested in me, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Paige finished for her. Exactly. So forgive me, I think I'm ready to move on from meeting someone the old-fashioned way. She turned back to face the screen and looked over her profile, checking for any obvious errors like an unfortunate typo that gave her age as 390 or something. Satisfied, she angled her head back up at Paige and smiled brightly. Done, she said triumphantly. It's live, as they say. Now I just have to wait to see if I'm going to be rejected in cyberspace as well as real life. Cyber-jected, I guess. Paige frowned at her and tousled her hair. Oh, go on, you. Just because you met some lousy guys. Just then a shadow passed in front of the windows, darkening the interior of the store. Both women looked up to see a large black pickup truck pulling to a stop in front of the store. Shit. Kate breathed between her teeth. She needed to log out of her profile and close this down. She looked up at Paige. Listen, please don't tell Noah about this, okay? Paige blinked, looking from Kate to the outside of the store, where Noah was climbing out of the truck. Yeah, sure, but why don't you want him to? Oh, you know him, Kate said quickly, trying to cover with a laugh. He'll just tease me about it, relentlessly. Well, I think he's going to know something's up when you start going on dates with men with 6 kids. Or, like, in Alaska. Kate glanced over to see him greeting someone with a hearty handshake. In a moment they parted. The stranger waved goodbye and headed across the street, and Noah turned towards the bookstore. Well, if it does come up, just say it's a dating site. Don't mention the marriage thing, okay? Kate urged, admiring his lean, long-limbed grace as he reached for the door and pulled it open, stepping inside to the gentle chime of the old brass bell. Okay, fine, Paige said, shrugging. She looked up with a smile to greet her brother. Hey, you. Noah's face broadened into a heart-melting smile when he greeted his sister. No matter how much they seemed to bicker, no matter how many times Noah's antics made Paige pinch the bridge of her nose with 2 fingers and sigh, it was clear how close they were. It made only child Kate's heart ache to see such love and affection between siblings. When she had kids, she was going to have 3 or 4 of them, she thought. Or more, if her biological clock kept ticking for a while. A whole house full of kids who could grow up to be the kind of friends Paige and Noah were. And for one second, for one wild, traitorous second, her mind flashed on the idea that maybe those 3 or 4 or more kids might even look something like Paige and Noah, too, if Noah were their father. She felt heat rising along the back of her neck, and she hoped to God the color didn't spread to her cheeks. Was she out of her mind? Even thinking of stuff like this was going to get her in big trouble. She was about to turn back to the computer screen without even greeting Noah when he looked down and caught her eye. His smile flickered a little, but she couldn't expect him to greet her with as much warmth as he did his sister, or even at all, considering what had happened that morning. Hey, Malone, he said, his voice mellow and smooth. Hey, Kincaid, she replied, heavy on the smoothness herself, or at least trying. He leaned casually against the counter, withdrew a smartphone from his pocket, and idly checked it for messages. God, the man was a wonder. Even in such a casual pose, he was graceful and lean, so masculine and so completely touchable that Kate could barely resist reaching for him. You just getting off work? Paige asked, handing Noah a cup of coffee. This morning, he said, taking the cup and lifting it to his mouth. His eyes wandered over to Kate's. Haven't been home yet. I had a few things I wanted to do. A hot tingle of awareness flushed up Kate's spine, and she dropped her eyes. She was one of those things. And how? You need to get to bed, Noah, Paige said, pointlessly, in that tone mothers and sisters and wives have used for millennia to remind their men of the obvious. That's what I was aiming for, yeah. Oh, God. Busy shift? Kate managed to ask, clearing her throat past a sudden obstruction. Probably her heart. Pretty busy, he said with a mercifully normal air of boredom. Our last call was up at, I can't say who, but we just had one from someone who called us to take her to the hospital because she's hungry. Hungry? Kate and Paige said in unison. Noah smiled. Yeah, that was a new one. That's not exactly a medical emergency, Paige laughed. Depends on how hungry you are, Noah shrugged. So did you take her? Kate asked, enjoying this safe topic of conversation, enjoying having an excuse to look right at him while he spoke. Had to, he said. His eyes shifted away from hers. She wouldn't sign off on us not taking her in, but I'm pretty sure the docs will set her straight. Or feed her. Either or. So look at you, saving lives one stomach at a time, Paige teased. Yeah, Noah said, squinting comedically and sucking air through his teeth. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Commotion in the doorway made them all look over, and upon seeing two older ladies with shopping bags struggling with the door, Noah set his cup down and stepped forward to open it for them, ushering them in with a dimpled grin that made them flutter and twitter like teenage girls. They cooed and fussed over him, their high-pitched voices outdoing each other to flatter, "Such a handsome young man." You should keep him on staff, Kate nodded towards Noah, who stood patiently as a pair of garish red lips planted a smooch on his cheek. Tell me about it, Paige said, shaking her head slowly in wonderment. I tried to talk him into just sitting in the window all day, but he won't do it. Tell him he can do it naked, Kate said wryly, calling up an image of him standing utterly naked on the dock. I bet he'd do it in a heartbeat. Yeah, geez, that was too much information. Paige scrunched up her nose, clearly remembering the same thing. I don't know what got into him. Me neither, thought Kate. The ladies moved on from their darling, happily greeting Paige as they trundled past the counter and collapsed with a breathy, perfumed whoosh of purses and shopping bags onto the sofa. Kate, do you remember Mrs. Heath and Mrs. Josipovich? Paige asked. They're the founding members of the Agathas, that book club I told you about. Yes, of course, Kate greeted them warmly. In fact, Mrs. Heath was my 8th grade teacher, and Mrs. Josipovich was the school librarian, at least for a time. Call me Audrey, dear, Mrs. J said. I ditched the man, might as well ditch his name, too. Everyone laughed politely at the joke Mrs. J had been using for years. All set for tomorrow night, ladies? Paige asked cheerfully. Oh, yes, we're looking forward to it, Mrs. Heath called out, smoothing out her floral print top as she settled into the sofa. In fact, we have a new member to introduce. A potential new member, Irene, Audrey cautioned, her ruby red lips pursed in disapproval. So she was Noah's kissing bandit, Kate thought. No one has approved him yet. Him? Paige asked, amused. A male Agatha? That's unheard of. We're a very modern club, Mrs. Heath said. We don't discriminate. He's a defector from the Arthurs, Audrey said, then narrowed her eyes. Or so he says. We'll see about that. The ladies began chirping about their potential new addition, and Paige went to put on more coffee. Kate tried valiantly to stay interested and peripherally involved in the ladies' conversation, but it was hopeless. Noah was standing right there, looking down at her, a strange smile crooking the corner of his mouth. What are you smiling at? She asked, trying to smile back and figure out the joke. He tipped his chin towards the computer screen. She turned and felt the blood drain from her face. There was her profile, loud and bright and big as day, staring back at them both. She hadn't managed to navigate away from it after all. She could only feel mildly relieved that the title of the website wasn't obvious on the profile page. She grabbed the mouse and quickly closed the window, muttering to herself as she did. She hazarded a glance up at him to see him still looking at her intently. Was that an online dating site, Malone? He asked. She fumbled. She tried to read his expression, but he looked more surprised than anything, and given how damn cute he was, he always sort of looked goofily happy. So I guess that's a yes. Why, Katie May, I had no idea you were looking for a date. She looked at him, daring him to laugh or make some rude comment, but he just looked at her, his eyes trying to twinkle. He was trying to be charming and light-hearted, she realized, seeing something unfamiliar in his eyes. But something else shone beneath the dancing merriment that was usually there. It's just a thing, Kate said. I was just curious. He nodded. Hey, none of my business. You don't have to explain. Then a thought occurred to him, and he frowned. But you do have to be careful about these things. Oh, no, not you too. She sighed, but grinned at him. I just heard all about it from your sister. I'm a grown woman. I think I can handle myself on a date. His eyebrows rose, and he crossed his arms over his chest. God, she hated it when he did that. Or rather, she loved it when he did that, but wished like hell he would just stop doing it already. Interviewing new people was part of my job, she said, placating him with a patient smile. I think I'll know how to spot a creep. Like the 6 creeps you dated? Paige put in, mildly, almost under her breath, to Kate's utter annoyance. I learned what not to look for. How's that? She said, wanting to be irritated but unable to hide a smile, the look of mock innocence on Paige's face. I certainly hope so, Noah said, because there are a lot of jerks out there, especially on these web dating things. You really have to be careful. Kate looked up at him to respond with something saucy, but something in his look softened and stopped her words. His eyes changed, grew more serious, and he uncrossed his arms before squatting down so that they were at eye level with each other. The new intimacy, the lack of space between them, startled her and warmed her at the same time. Listen, Kate, he said quietly, earnestly, his eyes roaming over hers. You don't need to do this. He tilted his head towards the now black computer screen. You don't have to go searching for dates. I know I've been coming on too strong lately, and I'm sorry, but He faltered a little, and the sudden vulnerability she saw in his face made her heart miss a beat. His eyes were wide and open, the devilish amusement in them gone. He was looking at her so imploringly, willing her to understand, that she put her hand out to rest on his shoulder in an impulsive gesture of support. He reached up and touched her wrist, his large, warm hand sending sparks of unfamiliar sensation whispering down her arm. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not trying to push, he said, as if he'd regrouped and rethought what he had been going to say. I just want to make sure you're safe. She had hurt him this morning, and it was as shocking to her as this quiet, earnest man in front of her was. This protective man who was swallowing his pride to make sure she didn't get hurt. Oh, God. She didn't know what to do with this Noah, with this gentler version of Noah. Except fall stupidly in love with him and throw every wish, every plan, every hope for the future right out the window. Noah, I wish I could... So have you found a job yet, Katie dear? Mrs. Heath's voice sailed above them, blasting through their little intimacy. Come over here, sit with us. Noah closed his eyes and kept them closed, his lashes fluttering slightly for a second before he opened them again and smiled. Kate smiled ruefully at him and urged him up onto his feet. They both went over to the sitting area and took seats on the sofa across from the ladies. No, I haven't found a job yet, Mrs. Heath, Kate said, settling in. She couldn't bring herself to call the woman Irene. Once you were someone's teacher, you'd always be a Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, always and forever. But I've been running my own business for a while now. I'm thinking of expanding. Oh, is that so? Audrey cooed. What sort of business? I run a seed business online. A what? Mrs. Heath frowned. Did you say seeds? Yes, seeds. Flower seeds. I started it about 4 years ago now, and it's really taken off. Noah was sitting so close to her she could feel the warmth of his leg through his jeans, and the little thrill that went through her was almost enough to make her lose her voice. Sorry, excuse me. I sell them online. Did I say that already? How do you sell seeds online, if you don't mind me asking? Audrey asked. I have a website, Kate explained. She could move over, of course, but then she wouldn't be pressed up against him so tightly. And I had a spare room in my condo where I collected seeds from various places. I would mix them into special packages for people who want certain mixtures, and then I would sell them online. I'm not sure I understand, dear. Mrs. Heath's long, mascara-clumped lashes blinked. Forgive me, I'm old school, as the kids say. Why would anyone want to buy seeds online when you can just go down to the hardware store and buy a package for $1? Kate smiled indulgently. These are special seeds. They're called heirloom, meaning they haven't been genetically modified. So they're organic and natural and all that good stuff. And I also sell very exotic seeds, too, from around the world. Things you can't get down at the hardware store. Well, isn't that something? Audrey said. Who knew? Kate wants to be a farmer, Noah drawled, leaning back lazily against the couch cushions. He moved his arm to stretch along the back of the sofa behind her, and even that made her tingle in all the right places. She tilted to look at him, expecting to see devilish derision in his eyes, but he was looking at her warmly as he had been a minute ago, and her heart stopped again. They're just seeds, Kate emphasized, and there's no such thing as a flower farmer. Paige came over to the group with a new carafe, heavy with fresh coffee, and placed it in the middle of the shabby chic wooden coffee table. Who's a flower farmer? She asked, turning to the ladies. See? Noah teased, reaching down to tap his fingers on her shoulder. In that moment she was almost breathless, hoping beyond all reason that he would just leave his hand there. He would just, so casually find his arm, just casually resting on her, like one of those moves from the 50s where the guy yawned and accidentally on purpose his arm ended up around his date. So you want to open a flower shop then? Audrey asked, accepting a cup from Paige. That would be wonderful. I was just saying last week we need a decent florist in this town. That one in the supermarket in Dunmore is the pits. No, actually, I'm thinking of expanding into bulbs, Kate said, leaning back just a little bit more against the sofa cushions. Maybe if her shoulder was just a little bit closer to his hand, it might, say, accidentally brush up against his fingers. Orchids, tulips, that sort of thing. But I need a greenhouse for that. So I'm looking. Irene, Audrey, and Paige all looked at each other at once, smiles erupting on their faces. Faces they turned back to Kate with barely contained excitement. Luna's house, Audrey said triumphantly, nodding at Mrs. Heath and then back at Kate. My dear, you just have to go see Luna's house. It's that old eyesore of a house on Granville Lane, but it has the cutest little greenhouse you've ever seen, and it's just sitting there going to rot. Really? Kate sat forward, her heart beating faster for a reason other than Noah's presence for once. I've never heard of it. I've lived here most of my life. Well, the house is empty for many years, and much of the lot has been completely overgrown for an age now. I don't think anyone lives there now. Luna, bless her, the old dear, gosh, she must be in, her 90s now? Audrey turned to Mrs. Heath for confirmation, who nodded in agreement and hummed a yes. But it was such a lovely house back in its heyday, Audrey said. Such a shame to see it go to waste. Such a shame, Mrs. Heath tisked. But I bet it'd be perfect for your little business, Audrey said brightly. I imagine she'd rent it out to you if you tracked her down. You should go by and take a look at it. Well, I certainly will, thank you, Kate said brightly. I thought I'd have to build my own. I had no idea there was one here already. And what's your little business called? Audrey asked. Do you have a name for it? Yes, Kate smiled, a little shyly. Well, the website does, anyway. It's called Zuzu's Petals. Zuzu's Petals? Audrey frowned, thinking. Why does that sound familiar? Did you say zoo petals? Mrs. Heath leaned forward. No, Zuzu, Kate enunciated more carefully. Zuzu's petals. Petals, like on a flower. Why is that so familiar? Audrey mused. Where have I heard that before? It's a Wonderful Life. Everyone turned to look at Noah, puzzled by his sudden, monotone interjection, and his sudden change of mood. His smile was gone, along with the glow that had warmed his eyes. Yes, that's right, Kate said, looking at him. It's my favorite movie. Yeah, I know. Kate frowned at him, searching his eyes for an explanation. He lowered his eyes before she could find one. That's it? Yes, said Audrey, snapping her fingers. Oh, that is such a lovely family movie, isn't it? So charming. They don't make wholesome films like that anymore. They sure don't, Mrs. Heath clucked. No, is something wrong? Kate asked, and resisted the urge to put a hand on his leg. Not a thing, he said, sighing out on a smile. He nodded to the women. Sorry, ladies, I have to get going. I need to get some rest before my shift tonight. But it's been delightful. He threw a sidelong glance at Kate and then stood, checking his phone again and moving slowly towards the door. He glanced up at Paige before leaving, smiling at her grimly. He nodded at everyone again and then pushed open the door too forcefully, making the bell clang a lot more loudly than usual. Well, no one's getting their wings based on that, Paige muttered, and the ladies laughed. I swear I don't know what's come over him. If I didn't know better, I'd say he was on drugs or something. Oh, you know young men, Audrey said. Nothing runs a man off faster than talk of flowers. Or babies, Mrs. Heath said. Or weddings. But he is such a handsome young fella, isn't he? Audrey craned her neck to watch him climb into his truck and drive off. Goodness me, Paige, your brother certainly is a heartthrob. Paige nodded. And a heartbreaker. And a heartache. And sometimes he even causes heartburn. Is he married yet? Or seeing anyone special? Audrey's voice was pitched so airily and so casually that she sounded like she was fishing for the 411 on a love interest. If she hadn't been 75, of course. Oh no, he's not married, Paige said. He's pretty much a confirmed bachelor. Mrs. Heath chuckled and leaned in to whisper conspiratorially. In my day, that meant a fellow was not a ladies' man, if you know what I mean. Oh, he's not gay, Paige said frankly. I wouldn't care if he was. I'd just be happy if he found someone to care about him. I think he's a bit lonely, to be honest, but he's just not the settling down kind. He's off to see the world this fall. He's got that volunteering trip to Panama. The ladies' voices rose an octave or two in excitement as Paige filled them in on his plans, but Kate tuned them all out. She sat, brooding, chewing on her bottom lip. Now what was it with him? One minute he was all warm and cozy, touching her shoulder, doing the arm thing along the back of the couch, and the next minute he's up and out the door like she had the plague. What had she said? They had just been talking about flowers and old movies. She hadn't said anything salty. She hadn't teased him. Was it the remark about not being a flower farmer? Did he have an aversion to greenhouses? Was there some traumatic greenhouse incident in his past she didn't know about? She's going to have to talk to him, try to figure out what was causing all of this. She could not go through the whole summer with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Kincaid. But in the meantime, the promise of a greenhouse buoyed her. She turned back to the ladies. Can you give me that address for the greenhouse? Oh, you can't miss the place, dear, Mrs. Heath said. Just head on over, go down the far end of Granville Lane and look for that old pile that looks like it's been condemned. That'll be Luna's.